You ever watch a movie and just feel like you have to take a shower afterwards? So Maniac tells the story of a psychopath terrorizing the nighttime streets of New York City, scalping young women as a pastime. What's going on, guys? This was actually a requested review from Killer Flicks, my horror movie Facebook group that I'm a part of. DJ Castano actually requested that I do this one. I'm going to be reviewing this one as well as the 2012 remake, I believe was the year of that one. So look out for that one as well. Never seen this original Maniac before. I've seen the remake before, don't remember much about it. Looking forward to checking that one out again. But I've always been intrigued about this original 1980 Maniac film, not only because of the crazy badass cover art for the poster of this movie, and not only because the great Tom Savini is doing the gore effects in this one, but because in the year of 1980, this was one of the premier movies that really kind of brought extreme graphic gore to a movie that a lot of Italian films were doing and not a lot of American films are really tapping into yet. So starting right off with the positives for this 1980 Maniac. First of all is just the atmosphere and the guerrilla griminess of this movie. It has a tone all on its own that you cannot recreate with any big budget studio film. The low budget and guerrilla tactics that they obviously use to film and shoot this movie is what makes it feel so icky and grimy and real. The biggest thing that I can compare this movie to as far as the way that it kind of makes you feel while you watch it is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Another movie that's very low budget, very grimy, and a little bit too close for comfort as far as the reality of it. This movie goes a little bit more into slasher territory than Henry. Essentially, your setup for this movie Maniac is just your traditional slasher setup, only this time the cameraman got paid to follow around the killer the entire time. So the entire runtime of Maniac, you're following all of the events behind Frank Zito, the maniac that the title tells you of. And that little reverse slasher setup was actually one of my main positives as well, because it's a very different experience watching a movie of this type with all of your slasher elements. You got all of the women that make the horrible decisions that you know is going to go to their demise. You got the final girl. You got all the telltale signs of a slasher movie, only you're seeing it all through the eyes of the killer. You get the killer's motivations. You get into the killer's psychology. You get to see how all the kills and the aftermath and everything affects the killer later on. All of those things that typically are not shown in a slasher, Maniac brings to the forefront. And luckily, since we're following the killer this entire time, behind the killer you have a very chilling and disturbing performance by Joe Spinell. You're gonna recognize this guy as the mobster that Rocky used to work for. Apparently he didn't like that Rocky bailed on him and he just went fucking dark. And Joe Spinell even helped write this movie, so it's kind of interesting to me. I wish I could know a little bit more of the backstory. Maybe this is just something that he kind of had boiling up inside of him, a character that he just wanted to unleash upon the 80s. But what makes his performance really chilling is that he has this dual personality thing. It's almost like a really fucked up version of Norman Bates.
You got to stop, or they'll take you away from me. Ever let them take you away from me.
He has this trauma with his mother. He talks to his victims like they're his mother. He talks to himself as if he's his mother and himself, like he's trying to tell him, don't kill them, and I know you want to stop, but I can't stop you. And all these little internal dialogue scenes that we get with the character of Frank Zito just really just slimes grime all over this guy. It makes it look like, in traditional sense where something like that would make you kind of sympathize towards him, this just makes you want to get farther away from this dude. Even when he's trying to interact with regular people in regular situations, like when he goes to this girl's photo shoot and he's sitting there and as soon as she's out of earshot, he's like, it's like a creepy pedo version of Michael Myers breathing. And I gotta give him credit. If you're gonna title your movie Maniac, if you're gonna make us follow the Maniac the entire runtime and make us get into the psychology of your Maniac, at least have a very memorable performance and a memorable character for your titular Maniac. And they do. Now, talking about this movie, I already brought up Tom Savini. You cannot discuss Maniac without discussing the gore effects. Now, there's not gore galore like a huge, gigantic splatterfest across the entire runtime, but whenever you do get to those scenes, whenever Frank Zito is just getting ready to unleash some hell upon these women, Tom Savini, once again, hats off to you, you sadistic motherfucker. Probably most memorable is the scene in which Tom Savini himself actually gets killed. Yes, he plays a character in this movie that literally gets his head blown off by a double-barrel shotgun. It is one of the most gruesome, realistic, and insanely awesome head explosions that I've ever seen. And my final positive with Maniac kind of goes along with the character of Frank Zito, but it kind of feels like it needs to be said separately. And that's just kind of how they unfold the story of what exactly made this guy go nuts. You get hints of it throughout the movie. You can kind of put two and two together. They give you plenty to chew on to let your imagination run wild and think about all the things that probably happened to this guy while he was a kid with his mother, but they don't give you too much, and that is such an important thing that a lot of movies, especially nowadays, just don't have the good sense to do, is to just give you enough and not slather it all over the screen and give you way too much backstory and flashback sequences and just go way too far with it. They unfold it and peel back the onion just enough by the end of this movie to where you get the full picture of what happened, but at the same time, they don't give you the full picture. They just give you enough for you to come up with a full picture on your own. And that does not happen very often, so I love that. Also makes the guy so much more interesting, intriguing, and scary, the fact that you don't know every single detail about his past. You guys know how I feel about prequels. A lot of that shit does not come into play here. It's all stuff that you can come up with on your own imagination, and that's the best way to do it. Now, as far as some of my negatives for this movie, of course, a lot of elements of this are gonna feel dated. This is a very low-budget, guerrilla shot 1980s slasher movie. Some of the things do not translate well when you watch it for the first time in 2018. That's just the way that it is. But one of the things that to me, I feel like is a storytelling element that they kind of fell on a little bit, or they kind of dropped the ball on a little bit, was just not having enough good side characters in this movie. I know you're supposed to spend a lot of your time and your attention on Frank Zito, but there's some characters that he interacts with, one moment in particular that he kind of has a fixation with, that I just don't feel like you really get to know her enough, and you don't really get invested in her enough to the point where you're kind of worried about how this relationship is going to bloom, what's going to happen, is she going to survive, is she not going to survive, is she going to find out who he is? None of those questions really come into play because she's such a lowly written character and such a small piece of the story that her side of it just kind of feels insignificant. Most of his victims in this movie are supposed to have that kind of random, spontaneous feel because that kind of adds that tension of this dude just kills anybody. If he sees a beautiful woman, he's just gonna follow her and scalp her. But when it comes to the woman that becomes your, quote unquote final girl, I just feel like she's just as random as the other victims. It just doesn't really have that punch in the finale whenever things kind of hit the fan. Also a pretty big negative with me for this movie, just like with Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, and just like another movie that's similar to this, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the fact that this movie is so grimy and gritty and almost uncomfortable to watch because it's so realistic and strange with the tone of it, this is not a movie that I think I'd probably ever watch again. If I do, it'd be years away from now. And that replay value really plays very heavy with me when I rate a movie. If I can watch it all the time, if I can recommend that you go see it and it's a movie that you put on your shelf and you just want to pop it in every couple of months, that bodes so well for me whenever I'm talking about a movie. When you get with this, you can appreciate it. I appreciate the artistry for it. I appreciate what it did for the slasher genre, some of the chances that it took, some of the different directions that it took, but it's not really an experience I probably ever want to have again. So all in all, when it comes to the 1980 original Maniac film, I think this is a very good movie to watch for hardcore horror fans. It's definitely one of those deep cuts, one of those things that is kind of like a hidden secret that a lot of people probably haven't heard about. It's good to reach out and grab those movies and check them out to see where cinema was at those times and see, where these films started to influence things that came later. I love the history of things like that. But as far as an entertaining aspect of this movie, I think that holds back quite a bit my rating because I wouldn't want to watch it again. So when it comes to the original Maniac, like I've already said, if you're a horror fanatic, this is a must watch just to check out the history and the different style that this movie brought to the slasher genre at the time of the early 1980s. But for the sake of the entertainment factor, I'm gonna have to let you know that it's probably best that you save your money and check this thing out on Netflix. So what do you guys think of the 1980 Maniac? Do you prefer this original movie or do you prefer the remake? Put all of your thoughts down in the comment section below, guys, and we will talk about it. And keep your eyes peeled for that review for the 2012 remake starring Elijah Wood, coming very soon, as well as all my Friday the 13th reviews that you guys have been tearing up lately. If you want to check out some of my social media links, check out the video description below for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and my Patreon page, including Stardust. Now, if you guys have not downloaded the Stardust app yet, do yourself a favor, check your phone, go download the Stardust app, and subscribe to me at Cody Leach. Very easy to find. It's the same name as my YouTube channel. It's the app that allows you to do 30-second reactions to movies and TV shows. Very cool, very easy to use, a lot of fun. And if I get 300 people to join and follow me in the next 2 months, it's gonna bump my level up on Stardust, which is gonna help this channel out a lot with cross-marketing. So please do me that favor and you guys will enjoy Stardust, I guarantee it. So if you wanna check all that out, guys, check the video description below. And if you wanna check out some more of my videos, you can check it out by clicking right over here.